Hey PC gamers, and welcome back to the PC Gamer Chat Log. This week, Molly and I have a special episode for you. We are going to be interviewing Adam Smith, who is the lead writer at Larian Studios, who you may have heard of recently for that game that they did that just came out, Baldur's Gate 3. So we're going to be talking... Yeah, that one. Has anybody seen that on social media anywhere or on the website pcgamer.com? Have you heard about it? We're going to be talking with Adam about all sorts of things Baldur's Gate 3, about characters, about quest lines, about Forgotten Realms lore, things that they've adapted from D&D, all sorts of stuff that went into Baldur's Gate 3. So we're not going to stick around here long. Molly, what did you do last week, though?
Yeah, believe it or not, I have been playing some Baldur's Gate 3. I finally bit the bullet and started a second playthrough. After Ted's resounding feature that he wrote on our website about starting a new playthrough after 20 hours. So I did the same, and I'm having a much better time because I understand the game better now.
Did you go with like new class? I know you needed a new look. That was a whole thing for you. You needed to redesign your character, but
I'm a storm sorcerer now, and I'm like utilizing the party better as well. So I'm getting like really cool, interesting conversations, which is very nice that I've been able to experience more of the dialogue, especially as we go into talk with Adam as well. That'll be been very appreciative, being able to see the first few hours of the game through more experienced eyes. I've been having a lot of fun. So yeah, how about you?
I've also been playing Baldur's Gate 3. I spent one night, as we know, playing D&D, since I do that weekly right now, but then the other nights I was playing Baldur's Gate 3. I have not restarted. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at, but I am going slower than everyone else. I don't know if I'm just really stubborn or I think I try to find really optimal ways through like combat or like talk my way through things or find like the perfect solution to a puzzle. So I end up like reloading, resetting, moving my party, like trying to find the exact right thing to do. And so my save file I need to look to tell you the right number. 58 hours is my Steam playtime right now. I think my save file is like 25 hours or more or something like that. And I finally finished Act 1. So that's the kind of player that I am, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll definitely be talking about Act 1, probably getting into Act 2. I'm sure we'll be getting into some spoiler stuff as we're talking about stories and characters and plots and all that good stuff with Adam. So after a short break here, we're going to be back with Adam Smith. Congratulations are in order, right?
Thank you.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about yourself, however much you want, and definitely tell us what kind of character you're playing in Baldur's Gate 3, or have been playing for the last however many years. What are you doing right now?
I've played just about all of them, but I'll tell you about my current one. So I'm Adam Smith. I'm lead writer on Baldur's Gate 3. This is my first game at Larian. I joined right after DOS 2, so I've been here for the whole Baldur's Gate 3 process. And yeah, it's great. It's finally out. I've said to many people, the hardest thing about making this game, this is true, was not being able to talk about the game. I hated it. It was really painful. The worst part of development was the first 2 years when we hadn't even said the name of it. It was painful. So yeah, it is another weird week. Really good week. I have been filling my time. My wife swore off EA. So now I was like, well, play multiplayer when it comes out. And it's a good sign when you want to play your own game, even after these many years. She kicked me out and now she's playing single player because apparently I keep spoiling the game because I know too much. So I'm currently doing a Dark Urge monk. So monk was our last class. And I fell in love with monks. So yeah, I'm doing a Dark Urge because I've done just about every combination of class, race, and background imaginable. Dark Urge was tested to high hell by me, but I never got to play it from beginning to end as a full, genuine, true run without cheating. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. How are you balancing being a monk versus the Dark Urge, which is just like chaos and like violence all the time, right?
Incredibly badly. So I'm a big role player. Like, I don't min max. I don't care about balance that much. So, in storytelling and in the game, so I like the chaos of it. So my backstory is the complete. I have no idea what has happened to me. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do the best I can. So I'm playing the Dark Urge that is resisting all the terrible things and is deeply regretful of all the terrible things that happen. I don't know if you've played it, Dark Urge, yet, but
There are people on our team who have dabbled with the Dark Urge. I don't think either Molly or I have personally, but I
Not
have
yet.
seen some of the screenshots.
it's the when we first announced it, I think I was really desperate to try and tell people this isn't just the evil run, because to me, and I'll be as spoiler light as possible, but the Dark Urge is potentially the most heroic playthrough, I think, because resisting what's inside you and actually getting through that and surviving it with your friends alongside you still, most of them intact, is I think the most heroic version of the game. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the hero run as best I can.
Okay, the secret hero run. Fantastic. During early access and as Baldur's Gate 3 was in development, I remember hearing a lot about how the team was playing tabletop D&D together, of course, to just like remind yourselves, get a feel for things, have experiences. Um, DOS 2, Divinity Original Sin 2, definitely had a reputation. Lots of people referred to it as a game that felt like it had a permissive DM, somebody that let you get away with a lot of like goofy stuff. Baldur's Gate 3, I think, has already inherited that reputation. What else about playing tabletop was really important to translate into this experience, like as a writer, and as the writing lead?
It's knowing when to. This is personal. I mean, it's definitely a Larian thing, but it's knowing when to let go as a writer. It's being the DM who says, "Oh, they're having fun over there. I'm not going to get in the way." It's really difficult to do because you want to make sure they understand what to do next. So one of the strongest challenges actually is saying, "We want you to have fun, but we don't want you to get completely lost." So we kind of subtly steer people back toward things. One of the nicest comments I've seen repeatedly is people saying the side quests tie back in, and that's very deliberate. Like whatever you end up doing, we try and poke you back toward the story without actually holding your hand and dragging you back toward the story. So the difficulty of that is definitely there. But actually, once you accept that's what you're doing, then you realize how many tools you have to do it with. And with the city, especially once you get there, we have hundreds and hundreds of background characters, and they're actually really handy little prompts. They're like little speed bumps that occasionally you're just like, oh, these guys are talking about something that's happening elsewhere. Then you go into a tavern and you're like, those guys are talking about the same thing, and eventually it registers and you think I should probably check that out, or you don't, it's fine as well. But it gives us another avenue to remind people who aren't necessarily checking the journal. But it's knowing when to get out of the way. It's one of the hardest things as a writer to do, is say I should probably shut up now. And it's true. Like it's very easy to overwrite and constantly be in people's faces, and especially in multiplayer, you really have to trust people to enjoy their own story. Multiplayer is a strange challenge because that's the closest we get to tabletop. I mean, it's very hard to play D&D solo. I think some of us do it, but when you have a group at a table, then quite often they're having the most fun when the DM leans back and says, I'm just going to let them deal with this. You throw a grenade into the room and say, deal with that. And then you sit back and you watch them, and you try to eventually see where all the pieces land, who's still alive, who's dead, and then say, okay, how are we going to deal with this? So a lot of the time, without saying that out loud, that's what our characters are doing. They're saying, what are we going to do next? But it's that, it's the hands off, I think, is the biggest lesson. Having said that, my tabletop campaign at Larian, we never left the first tavern. We played for like 4 weeks and we never got out of the tavern. So to the frustration of our DM.
Yeah, it does feel very much like Baldur's Gate as well. It's like you just spend
exactly,
so much time in the same place, right?
Like with anything in the game, whether it's a house that you go into or whether it's a full dungeon, at best, they're little rabbit holes that you go into and you come out like 4 hours later blinking and go, what the hell did I just do down there? And again, that's sometimes you just have to say, let the systems, trust in the systems, trust in the players to enjoy playing with those systems and just stay out of their way. And then when they come back out again, talk to them a little bit and say, how are you? Not like a therapist, sometimes it is, but how are you? Are you okay? What do you need to do next? How can I help with that? It's the hardest part is making sure that people don't get completely disorientated as well sometimes. It was always the challenge of the city. You get to a city and you get overwhelmed with information in real life as well as in a game. And I know that we didn't do a perfect job of it, but I think we did a pretty good job of saying, like, you have objectives here that are pretty clear. And then when you get lost and you go off track, there are certain things that will prompt you and point you back toward it. And we do that dynamically as much as we can as well.
Yeah. I would say that you did a pretty good job of that. And I find it really interesting that you say about being very cautious of not trying to overwrite, because I never really get that impression that there's like too much, which is wild because there is so much dialogue in this game. There is like, you can talk to everyone, and you often have so many different ways that you can handle a conversation, right? That is something that I've really been enjoying, is that you can do like a different class or a different background, and the conversation will take such a different direction. And I think especially when so many of these different solutions can have a direct impact on your relationship with your party as well, right? And I just like, how did you manage to sort of take such a tangled web and make it work as well as it does? Like, how do you put something like that together?
First of all, I think that the thing that you said about having so many options in the dialogues, like the term I use like internally, and is that we do collaborative storytelling. We don't want to tell you a story; we want to tell a story with you. So when if you're having an experience where you get some of our text and then you get to pick an option, then that to me is us succeeding. And occasionally, we had a rule very early on where it's like, if there's a certain number of sentences that a character's saying to you and you've not had a chance to say something back yet, then that's not good enough, that we don't like that. Now, occasionally we break that rule because somebody is lecturing you, and often we joke about it. You can say to them, is this going to finish soon? And you can just tell them to shut up. But we do let the villains especially want a monologue occasionally, so we put you in a situation where it's hard to talk back, but you can also just throw something at them and shut them up if you're in multiplayer. So we work out ways to deliver information as in as light a way as possible, so you're not just sitting and listening to our story. So if you're involved and you're picking options, then I think we did our job well. And then of the tangledness of it, it's partly a lot of work, but the key thing that we had was, whenever we play the game, and we play the game constantly since very, very early, we sit and we play everything we put into the game, we test it straight away, and we run it by other people. Sven also never stops playing the game. Like, he's so hands-on with it. And if you get to a point in a dialogue and the person playing it hesitates and looks unhappy, then it usually means they need a different option. And often what we find is they're saying, I wasn't represented in this. I couldn't say the thing I wanted to say. Now, we don't want to overface people with 25 options, because then they're scrolling through them and they just get lost in it. So it needs to be limited to an extent, but we try to be as broad as possible in what you're allowed to do. And that means sometimes you see just ridiculous things like, oh, I can just be so insulting here, or I can be so heroic here and so valorous, and they feel very on the nose. But we prefer that to people not feeling represented and thinking, I don't have anything that my character wants to do here. That feels bad. And then with the class and the race options, we want to give as much as possible. So we actually, at some point toward the end of toward release, toward the end of early access, toward release, we had an entire team that were going back through Act 1 and actually improving it, because by the time we finished Act 3, we had so much reactivity for classes and all this stuff that was in there. And we looked at Act 1 and we were like, we did a pretty poor job, so we added a lot more. So there was an entire team of people just running through the game and saying, like, I'm playing as a monk, I get to this point, or I'm playing as a cleric, I don't feel like it's a good option for me here, so they put it in.
That's awesome, because I'm just finished Act 1 myself recently. And this whole time, as Mollie says, I feel like I'm constantly, whether I'm on my paladin save or my monk save, getting options to play as my class or as my background. Just so many choices. It's been so neat. I did want to briefly take us over to something you mentioned on Twitter, on X, depending on what you're calling these days. About sort of an homage to BioWare's RPGs, and I wouldn't be here without BioWare's RPGs, so it was great to see you saying the same thing. That was the experience you had. Before we get into talking about characters maybe a little bit. I don't know if that's the area where you feel that most, or if it's about being a CRPG.
It's the characters actually. So I grew up with Ultima 7 was my first love in the RPG space, and then shortly afterwards, Baldur's Gate 1 became the second great love, and then Baldur's Gate 2 superseded that, and it was the first time I'd been attached to characters, and so my very first RPGs were back on the Atari, and it was things like Dungeon Master, the kind of Grimrock style. Oh, my lights have gone off. 1 second. It doesn't think I'm alive. Oh no, wait 1 sec. It's all motion sensors.
It's fine.
Or it goes off at 5 p.m. maybe. They're telling me to go home. And in those games, your party I always refer to them as a keychain. You basically had a keychain, and they were characters on the keychain, and they were just keys. So your rogue was the person who could pick a lock. Your cleric was the person who healed you and turned undead. Your warrior stood at the front and soaked up the damage. And then you played Baldur's Gate, and suddenly you were like, oh, these are human beings. Some of them. But they're people, and they actually get pissed off with me, and they get annoyed with each other, and they fight each other, and they're very, very over the top in BG1. Like it's so easy to get them murdering each other and just saying like, oh, you're not as heroic as I thought you were, and they just leave you. And that was just amazing, because suddenly they weren't keys, they were living things. And then Baldur's Gate 2 doubles down on that, and suddenly Jaheira's like the most important character to me. Like somebody said to me, and I can't remember who it was. It was a player, not someone at Larian. They said that they never appreciated Jaheira until they got older, and I think I had the same thing. She was never my favorite character, and the older I got, the more I loved her. And so I always wanted her to be in the game. And the thing I loved about Jaheira in Baldur's Gate 2 is that she goes through grief, and she goes through loss, and that didn't happen. Like, death was just the thing that happened that was an annoyance. Then you resurrected somebody. And to bring this character back and say what has happened in 100 years, what does somebody feel like after that? What is it like to be a hero? And we wanted to do a passing the torch moment, but we also wanted to say this is a person with like a history that is living with them, and their own scars, like emotional scars that and you're a reminder of that, because you're like, come back into the fight with me. And there's some stuff, like a lot of the really kind of emotional beats of the character buried deep in the in-party dialogue, so like you only get them, and because Jaheira is not romanceable, you don't get them as explicitly, because I know we made them too thirsty. We're aware of it. The internet has told us this.
It depends on your taste. It's okay.
It does.
Not for us. Not for the two of us.
But Jaheira, because she's not romanceable, it's a little bit different in terms of what the arc is there, because you recruit her later. And really there, it's about saying, what was it like to live through those events you lived through? And getting that story from her, I get very emotional with that. And that's partly because it is a reminder of my own past, but it is also, this is literally BioWare's story and BioWare's character. And it's easy to forget because the game's out there now, and it's out there. But when we first started working on this, it was like, this is Shoulders of Giants stuff. And it was such a big shadow. We were like, do we ever look okay in this shadow? There was anxiety about it. We were all confident in ourselves to tell a story that we thought was very good, but we always heard it. We'd get the people saying, well, it's DOS 3, it's not really Baldur's Gate 3. And we were like, no, we love Baldur's Gate, we want to make Baldur's Gate 3, and there was a reason for that, and it was because so many of us did come up with it. And yeah, it means a lot whenever I see anybody who was even vaguely associated with the original games being pleased, because we owe them a huge debt, and we hope we did them proud. Yeah, for sure. And if in 20 years time somebody picks up our characters and does something with them, it'll be amazing. I mean, it does feel like, what a wonderful thing to have them live that long.
Yeah. Speaking of thirsty characters, I would say almost the entire PC Gamer team is obsessed with Karlach. I thought I was going to be alone. No, it's nearly all of us. And that surprised me. Have you been surprised by the like popular reaction to any particular character? Like what the internet is saying about anybody?
Not really. If there's one thing that I felt confident in, it was the characters. I mean, there's people who won't get on with some of them, which is also fine. I stake Asterion so often because I'm just like, oh, screw you, stop biting me. I love him, but also, god damn it, Asterion.
Get out of my playthrough.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then I feel bad about it. But I've always loved Lizelle, and Lizelle is like very off-putting when you first meet her. I like that about her. I think she's really good fun, and the people who get annoyed with the character would always say, like, see them through, because they do have an arc. There's a reason for them to be the way they are, especially Asterion, actually. For Karlach, I think we fell in love with Karlach very early on, and Karlach has been cooking for a long time, and she has the advantage of being a response in some ways to early access, where we had people saying, the party edgelords. And we were like, you want a happy-go-lucky hell lady? Yeah, you do. And we always had the idea that this was the missing piece of the party, was this kind of big old puppy dog who has possibly the most horrific backstory of everyone in the game, but it's just like, I'm alive, man. Like, it's great. And that was super important to us. And having somebody who is just having a blast, like that felt right. And for all of them, but I think Karlach in particular, the character artist, I mean, like, holy shit, like she's instantly iconic to look at, and I think they nailed it. We had so many discussions about everything to do with her design, and this is what usually happens, Larian, is you have all these conversations, you go back and forth, and you say, what about we try this, and then somebody does something slightly different to all of it, and you go, that's the one. And that's just a combination of beautiful things. But we did all our reworking on Will, which obviously involved Karlach as well, tying the story together and actually having a character who's like, hey, my main objective is to kill one of the other characters. Like that was such a risk. And there were points when we were like, are we really chasing our own tails here? Is this too much? But I think we pulled it off. Like it's such a risk tying characters together from minute one, but you're like, okay, they actually have enmity for each other. But like Will and Karlach can become the best like buddy movie in the world if you actually get them to fall in the same party. So, but no, they don't surprise me. I think Gale was always the one. Like Gale's divisive in the office, in terms of whether people like him, but some people are like, oh, he's a nerd. I'm like, he's like the hottest wizard possible. Look at the man. Like, that's what nerds look like. Cool, he's got this beautiful head of hair. Like, he's dashing. And I think the thing that always gets me, Gale, and I actually said this on X/Twitter, whatever, was Tim Downey, who is the voice actor. He's in like Toast of London. He's one of the guys in the booth, and he's a brilliant comedian. And the thing that Gale has that is impeccable is comic timing. And he's not a character who tells jokes, but he's got this pomposity that he's aware of himself. So he just makes me laugh. And every single time there's a moment with Gale where I'm like, oh God, you just showed me your heart and now I want to cry. It surprises me because I've seen Tim in a VO booth and he's so funny. He's just naturally gifted as he makes everything sound funny. And then when he like bleeds for you, it's like, oh my God, like it's incredible. Not literally.
I feel like we all need a Gale in our life. We all need that hot, kind of pompous nerd friend.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something that, because normally when it comes to, like characters that you can romance, I always have like one or two favorites, and that's it. I am kind of a Lizelle girly in this one, but I am having such a hard time picking a romance option, right? Because they're all quite forward. They're all quite, there's a lot of romance and sex happening in Baldur's Gate 3. So I was just wondering, what is like a good kind of romance scene to you? Like how does making that for each individual character come together?
So there's basically we have a bunch of different versions of what a good romance scene is, I hope. And one of the things that we did was we wanted them to initiate a lot of the time, rather than you say, oh, I'm bringing you things and that means I want to sleep with you, and is that going to go anywhere? So one of the reasons I think they come across as forward is that we did want them to be the person who comes to you and says, hey, you're impressing me, are you interested in taking this further? We also very early on were like, these are people who don't know if they're going to survive the day. So some of them, like Karlak, when you first meet her, is very open about the fact she's like, I've not been able to touch anyone for years. We might all die tomorrow. Do you want to sleep together? And that's not a romance; it's a sex scene. And then what we wanted to do was say, how do we take the beginnings of these characters, like Lizelle? I mean, in her early stages, it's very much like, this is a way to work off tension. You've impressed me as a soldier and a warrior, and there's no real commitment to it. And what we wanted to do is to take that and say, what is their arc? What is their meaning in the world and in the campaign? And what is the end of that? And so we look at that and then we extrapolate from that. How does that look if you're in a romance with them? So it's all about them traveling through their story, and you happen to be accompanying them and sometimes pointing them in a certain direction or guiding them a certain way. But it started with the story. It always started with the story. Like, who is Asterion? How did he get like this? Like, I mean, because you see the people, oh, I can fix him. And really, it's like, to do that, you have to be like, how did this happen? What is wrong with this person? And we joke about it, and I love joking about it and being silly about it. But like they have trauma, a lot of them, and I hope that when we get to the end of their stories, a lot of the time you see it exposed, and it kind of, one of the things we wanted to do was to invert it a little bit. So sometimes you start with the sex and you end with the hook, because actually you're breaking down barriers, and sex is not the goal. Like, it's a thing that it's sex, and it can be very meaningful to some people. To some people, it's not the most meaningful thing. To some people, the most meaningful thing is you saying to them, I will never leave you. And to some of them, it's saying, hey, that had meaning in a way that you didn't think it did. I want you to understand me. And so the way that they kind of travel through that, well, essentially, to answer the question, it had to mean something for them. It had to be something that was meaningful for the character and be true to them. And that doesn't mean it's the most important thing that's ever happened to them ever. And I think that's often what I find distracting about romance stories, is they're always like, I don't just mean in games, in general, it's like, this is the most important thing that's ever happened to me. It's like, it's very unlikely that's true if you're in the situation these people are in, but it can be the thing that makes you want to get through it. Like, for some of them, it's the reason they want to survive. And yeah.
I'm really glad you said that, actually, because we spoke about RPG romances on an episode a while back, didn't we, Lauren? And we called it like a vending machine.
Yeah,
romance,
vending machine
where it's
romances.
Like, yeah, you just like find what that person likes, you spend all your money, and you just give it to them in the hopes that they like you. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what I liked about the romance in this, but that is really true. Yeah, it's the fact that you're not the one that's doing the pursuing for once, right? It feels a little more natural that way.
It does mean that you lose a little bit of control over it, which I think we can improve on. We're already, working on hot fixes and patches. I think one of the things that we can probably improve in the storytelling is making those feel a little bit more natural. They're very, very complicated, the way they're built. And sometimes you're like, oh, this person didn't have the most satisfying experience with the romance. Sometimes it's because this dialogue triggered before that dialogue, or they didn't get this like bridge into this section. So we'll work on it. But I'm happy with them on the whole. I'm very happy with them. And I think that one of the things that's been nice is seeing people respond to the fact that we do think about like how people's boundaries work. And you can have conversations about that as well. And we don't want to make it like a PSA. We want to make it feel like people talking about their boundaries, because people do. It's, like especially people who are in terrible situations and maybe clinging to somebody because they're like, there's a desperation to it sometimes. And it's one of the hardest things to do is to figure out like urgency, because RPGs, you take them at your own pace. But we try to get across this sense of they don't know what tomorrow brings, and especially as you get toward the climax, I won't spoil it if you've not finished it yet, but as you get toward the climax, things get very, very apocalyptic, and there's points where it's like, this might be the end. And having that conversation with someone you've formed a bond with and just saying, we don't know if we're going to make this, is pretty powerful.
I appreciate that you brought up the voice actors. I've been catching videos on TikTok of, I think, Lae'zel's voice actor in particular coming up and saying, yeah, like you did, that like, hang on with Lae'zel, she comes off a certain way, and then she kind of changes and develops throughout this story. And a couple of them have also talked about how collaborative that experience was going in and doing voice recording. Do you have any examples of times when maybe one of the actors like sort of nudged a character in a certain direction that either you were looking for or you didn't expect even?
With the origin characters, the minute we got the first batch of recordings for them, because they started working on the recordings 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago even. Man, it's been a long time. So they've had the characters in their head for so long. But what happened for us was that we launched early access, and then there was a little bit of a break in VO. When I say little, it was very short. But then some of them had been in the booth like pretty much every week for the last 2 or 3 years. So what that means is that after a certain point, you've got this critical mass and you're like, okay, I know what this character sounds like now. So you're writing in the voice of the person who's speaking the lines. And then you know when something doesn't feel natural for them. We very rarely had anyone say this doesn't feel true to the character, partly because I think they had lived in their heads for as long as we had. So it's very, very collaborative in the sense that we know them, they know them, they would communicate about them to us. We have back and forth about them. Like they own them as much as we do, because they were right there. And then even for the smaller NPCs, it's the same. It's like you get to know the actors, and like, you'll have the same actor come in to do another role, and you already know how they speak and you have a good idea of it. But for the origins, yeah, I mean, like again, I go back to Jaheira because Tracy came in for that, and it was like, hey, we need you to do a voice that was done in a game 20 years ago, and here are some samples of the voice, and you're going to have about 100 times more dialogue than it's ever been recorded for this character before, and it's going to be in much higher fidelity, and we're with you. Like we are going to make sure that this doesn't go horribly wrong. And I mean, I remember her first tape coming in, and it was just like, okay, that's the one, like straight away. And then the first time that we edited some of Tracy's stuff after it had come in, I think was just because we'd heard the voice and we were like, actually, this is a much more, so we had this version of Jaheira, which you still get bits of, where she was much more like, I'm going to take my swords off the wall and go in for one more mission. And actually, Tracy brought this energy to it, which was much more like, I'm back and I'm loving it. So there was much more energy in it. So we started to tweak it a little bit, not because she said, oh, this doesn't feel true, but because we heard the voice and we were like, this is someone who still can kick your ass, and wants to. Jaheira could always kick your ass, but we were like, she's actually kind of enjoying being back in the saddle. And I mean, Devora for Lae'zel, I mean, like everything about Lae'zel's little alien chicks and all this, like where she's just being like really rude, that was all from Devora. That was just like you hear it the first time and you're like, oh, we can get away with this, because sprinkling like all the apostrophe Z words into a thing is often just like, I want to make this character sound a little bit more alien, and then you're like, oh, actually this is really funny. and Devora can do it in a way that's really funny, but also there are points where she's using GIF language to try and get something really serious across to you, like, yes, you can do this. I got one note from you've probably seen Amelia's outtakes, our narrator,
Yes.
her outtake videos. I got one note from Emma, who plays Minthara, and she was just like, thanks for all the drow words, they're really good fun to say. And I was like, that's sarcastic, isn't it? They're really hard to say. She nailed them, but my god.
I love that. I love how close it all was, especially because I feel like Lae'zel has such like a knack for comedic timing as well. I know it is like referenced as well that she's considered more humorous among the Githyanki, right? So that's really cool. I'm really happy that it was like a collaborative process, and I feel like that really shows as well with how kind of familiar the characters feel almost. So yeah, really, really cool. So obviously you are the lead writer. I am sure you have written far too many lines of dialogue to remember all of them. But I was wondering if like maybe you had like a specific favorite, or if there's like a favorite maybe quest line, or just like a specific like quotable line of dialogue that you really love.
Oh man, the stuff I want to say. Okay, fine. I can say stuff that's from deeper. It's fine. Block your ears if you don't want to hear. They're not story spoilers. I actually write less dialogue than you might think. My job is mostly to edit everyone else's work. So I know other people's lines better than my own, because those ones I kind of write them and let's say somebody else can deal with that now. Whereas everyone else's lines, I'm like, okay, how do we make this as brilliant as it can be? But I spent a lot of time on Minthara. And we knew from the beginning Minthara is a character that most people will kill. She's a villain. You meet her, you can recruit her, but most people kill her. We know that from the stats, and we knew that putting the effort into writing lots and lots of dialogue for this character was going to be appreciated by very few people. But we're like, hell, it's good. I nearly swore. Don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
You're good.
I put in one line, which I don't know how many people will ever see it, and I'm going to just say it now, so Minthara's story, she's been infected with tadpole. She's working for the cult, and when you recruit her, essentially she comes under your protection and she can no longer hear the voice of God, of the Absolute, and you deprogram her. And she doesn't become a nice person. She's just like, okay, let's do evil for ourselves now. Let's not do it for anyone else. Let's take control. And there's a moment in when she gets very close to you, if she does, where she says, she has a crisis of confidence, and she says, I don't know if I can do this. And you can say, look, you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. And she says, if I'd never met you, then I would have still been a maniac, doing things at the will of a God that doesn't exist. And you can say, but you did meet me. And she says, yeah, and 9 times out of 10, I would have been one more corpse in your crusade. And it's a little sad moment, but it's also a little tap on the fourth wall that says, yes, in all your other playthroughs, you pieces of crap. No, she's a horrible person and shouldn't be saved. But like the ones that I love are the moments where we're writing this for a very small audience. Mm-hmm. And when they get to it, they're going to get something special, and that stuff I love. I love our villains as well. I think the Orin is. I didn't write a single line of Orin dialogue. That was AD, one of our writers over in Guildford, and I remember we were like, okay, we need a chosen of Baal. We need this kind of murder queen, and like we had these different concepts for what we wanted to do, and we tried a few different takes out, and AD was sitting and writing like this version of the character, and I read it and I was like, make more of it like that beginning where it was this very, I don't know if you've met Orin yet, but like a very, like her language is dripping in blood. Like she is, everything is guts and death, and like she's barely coherent sometimes when she gets excited, but she refers to people as skin and bone, like and it's so high register in like and very high concept for one of our characters, linguistically. And I looked at it and I was like, if we can make it all like that and it's still coherent, then we've got the character. And I came back like half an hour later and she was like this. And I was like, oh yeah, like that. And it was just you saw the whole character. And then I talked to AD like a week later, and she had a notebook on her desk. I looked at the notebook and she was like, oh, that's my Orin notebook. And it's just pages that are just scribbled with different like words for bones and blood and viscera. And she's like, if anyone sees this when I'm sitting on the train to work, I'm going to get arrested. I look like a psychopath. But she's just like, this is my Orin thought book. And she's the sweetest person in the world. She's so nice. And yeah, that one came out. So I think she's amazing. And yeah, just I'm lucky because that one I got to just experience fully. I get to, and that's the one that Maggie Robertson voices, Lady D from Resi 7.
Yes.
And my God, like, the combination of that writing and that performance, it's just phenomenal. Yeah, she's my favorite.
As a Dark Urge monk, are you going to recruit Minthara on that playthrough?
Yeah, I have her already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I usually take her along just because I spent so much time with her.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that our team has been talking about is all of the wild like monster lore that some people are getting exposed to for the first time. I mean, I came across a spectator in the Underdark. I was familiar with beholders. I did not know what a spectator was. And then somebody starts enthralling me with the details of the spectator life cycle, which is apparently horrifying. Um, as you were digging into like D&D lore, creatures, monsters, like what were some of the coolest ones that you got to either like include in a quest or just make people fight? Like what were the bits of lore that you really liked digging up for people?
Well, the first one is very obvious, but was Mind Flayers. And I remember very early on, we were like, what actually happens when you're infected and you're turning into a Mind Flayer? And we talked to Wizards of the Coast, and they said, we've never gone into a lot of detail because obviously they want people to make up their own stories. So we wrote a 7-day document, like a document going through the 7 days and what happens to you during those days, and sent it to them, and they were like, yeah. We were like, yay, that's the response we wanted. So this kind of, and you know, the characters will explain it to you. Gale does it, and Lizelle does it, you know, like all this stuff about your skin peeling off and your organs liquefying. And so we spent a lot of time looking at mind flayers and like, what do their colonies look like? What is it to be part of a hive mind? And so, yeah, they were fascinating because I knew what a mind flayer was. Now I feel like I know them like my best friends. And then actually, one of the other ones that is early in the game, that one of those names that's been around forever in my head is Knowles. And we wanted to do something really interesting with them. So they I don't know if you've met the Flynn, who's the pack leader, but when we were looking at Knowles, we were like, okay, you have these creatures, and they're actually, so they are creations of a chaos god, Yinagu, and they all they want to do is eat, and the god just wants them to devour the world, and it's like the world is made of flesh and meat, and like you are created to devour it. And then we were like, okay, they get birthed from hyena corpses, and we were like, what the hell? So we were like, well, we've got to visualize that. So we did the cinematic of that, which is horrific. And then we looked at the Flint, and we had this idea. We're like, what happens if the absolute cult puts a tadpole inside a creature that's brain is made up of chaos, and you have this fight between the chaos god and the tadpole that's telling it it's a new god. So we did this entire scene where you can get into this thing's head and see the war between these two different gods that are fighting over control of its brain. And then you can either have mercy, or you can say, you know, let's make this place set on fire and like basically blow its brain out. And stuff like that was interesting, like finding these creatures that we kind of already known about, and like they've lived in our heads as people who play fantasy RPGs, and saying, how can we do them differently? But also, what does it mean if you start to infect them? What does it mean if you start to play with that? So that was a lot of fun. There's some stuff in the hells as well. We spend a lot of time thinking about devils and demons, and there's not actually demons in the game, but there's a lot of devils. But it's fundamental to them that they were the opposite of the demons. So the whole, you know, the devil as a lawyer, like was a big part of it. Like, you know, approaching the contract, and it's all legalese, and they want you to sign up, and you're like, there's always going to be a small print. And the gap between, we don't use the alignment terms like in the game, but the gap between lawful evil and whatever you might be when you meet these people. People playing RPGs, you know, the whole murder hobo thing, people tend to lean toward the chaotic evil because that's just what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So putting a devil in their path is like, look, I have solutions for you, but they're going to require you to be a little bit more smart about the way you apply pressure and the way you do things. That was a key part of it. One of the criticisms we got in early access was all of our evil routes were too chaotic. We addressed that as much as we could, and we did, I think, some clever things with it. But one of the things we wanted to do was say, like when you first meet Jaheira says, look, you're infected. We can use that against the bad guys. So like all the things that you think are a flaw in you, we can use for the greater good. And then, of course, you can say, yes, and the greater evil, whatever it might be. So
Cool. Yeah, we also had on team a moment of, oh, what the hell? Knolls are from hyenas. I distinctly remember somebody in our work chat had the exact same like, ew, what the hell?
Yeah, it's really weird, right?
There's a lot of gross stuff.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of body horror, like
yes.
you know, the Knolls are part of that as well. It's not a game for the squeamish, like, and then, we
I am
kind of
clueless.
advertised that with the eye thing right at the beginning. Also,
Yes.
somebody said a Larian writer's got a problem with eyes. We do have a lot of eye trauma in this game. It just felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of eye stuff. There is.
There is a lot of eye stuff.
I was not prepared for it. I have not been on the Baldur's Gate hype train until like maybe a month or two ago. And I watched that opening cutscene and I had just eaten dinner. That is all I'm gonna say is I had just eaten dinner and I watched that cutscene. Yeah, there's a lot of like visceral, very, very visceral descriptions as well. Like was that like did you know you were just gonna like, go like super, super ham into like the body horror stuff or because damn.
Yeah, I think once we knew it was mind flayers, which we did from the beginning, we knew we'd have to have some of that. Like it's kind of integral to the story. Is you're afraid of what's going to happen to you. You're going to lose your body. You're going to lose your mind. So we always knew that'd be there. We didn't want to go too overboard with it. We probably did. But people like it. So I remember when we did I don't know if if you get the tadpole powers and you start leveling up your illithid abilities, the menu screen for that is just a brain and you have to drop tadpoles and they burrow in and your brain gets more and more infected. And remember the first time we saw that bit of UX, we were just like, okay, yep, okay, we're doing that, are we? And you could dangle them over it and just be like, and they just wriggle into it, which is, hideous. So, and then Act 2 is like, I mean, it's our horror act. Like, that's where we delve deeper into all of our favorite horror references and influences. That's also, we made up a lot of our own creatures for that one because we were talking about this place where things are twisted by a curse. So we could let our concept artists go wild with the stuff they created there. But yeah, we always knew like that we'd have that certain level. It was always to us it was an 18 rated game or whatever it might be in whatever country it is, for the violence, for the sex, for the language, and the concepts as well. I mean, like it's a very dark game. We always wanted the moments of light as well, because otherwise, God, it's miserable. And this is, I think, one of the reasons people respond well to Karlak is somebody who you throw all these horrors at her and she just does a little dance. And it's like, you need that in your life sometimes. So yeah, and I think to me, for all the horror that's in there, the darkest parts of the game, the most devastating parts of the game is always the companions. It's finding out, some of the endings for them, like even the happy endings. Like, I mean, it's the hope that kills you.
So as the lead writer, you've told us already, I mean, you're in the midst of this big launch right now and everything feels weird. You're finally getting to share like this, so many things that you've kept in your head for so long. So, as we're post-launch now, you are officially post-launch. It's out there in the world. What, as a writer or as a team lead, are you paying attention to, either sort of within your team or within the community? Like what is catching your eye or has your attention as you're thinking about what comes next, I guess?
For me, it's a balance of really like feeling really proud and happy. I with the actors you were talking about, I love seeing them be proud of the work. It's genuinely just such a boost. And anytime someone in the team sees something they worked on, it's just like, seeing somebody just putting a social media post up about it and just being happy. Like, I mean, it's such a obvious thing to say, but it's very true. We do this to make people happy. Like, that's why we do it. And so that's super uplifting. And then there's the other part of my brain, which is like, how do we fix the things that people aren't happy with? And, as a storyteller, you can't be too beholden to that. But because it's a game and it's a very complicated game, there are points where, so the ones that I want to improve are the ones where I see it and I say, that didn't land how we intended it to. And if that's for emotional reasons, if that's for just somebody not having a good time with a particular story, a particular character, that's okay. But where we go, that didn't land properly because we messed something up. We didn't deliver it, the pacing was off, or we didn't quite get the emotion we wanted. You see people sometimes where they're confused by something they say, like, what did this mean? Why did they say this to me? Or why couldn't I say that? Those are the ones that I look at and I say, well, we can do better there. Mostly proud though, like, I feel very happy and I they just seeing the amount of people who responding to it positively and just having fun with it. Somebody said something to me, and this was maybe a month ago when we were doing the press event over in Ghent, and somebody who'd been playing the game said to me, early access broke my heart, and they were talking about a specific story moment, and they said, and I hope you fix it again. And I got all teary-eyed, and I was like, and that really was it. I was like, I hope we do. I hope that the people who get really invested in it, that they feel that we honoured their time with it and their attachment to the characters. So happy mostly. Occasionally, it still feels very surreal, but
it's here now. It's out. It's all good.
Yeah. We got the PS5 launch, so we got to get. The nice thing about that is that we have stuff that we know we can improve. So everything that we improve goes onto PC first, but then the PS5 launch will have smoother stuff. Because the game's so complex, there is stuff that obviously we go, damn it, how did that slip through? But we want it to be better and better and better. We will never be satisfied. We're very happy, but that doesn't mean we're like, this is the end of it.
Yeah, well, we are hoping for successively impressive launch weeks for all the other platforms that Baldur's Gate 3 winds up on. We are really happy to be in here. Some of the first people playing, starting in on this 100-hour journey, depending on how stubborn you might be. And how badly your save file is doubled by your playtime reported on the platform. It can be a little bit embarrassing.
We massively underestimated how long the game is. I think we always will. We were trying to gauge it, and we were like, we think it's this long. We think it's this long. For some people, we probably got it right. But again, I say my wife's playing at the moment, and she's still in Act 1. And I'm like, there's so much more to see. Come on now. Never going to get out of Act 1.
I'm sorry. I relate to her. I just finished Act 1 recently. I'm so slow. And with that, we have Baldur's Gate to get back to this evening. And I know you do too, in one way or another. Adam, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us. It's been an incredible launch so far. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, enjoy. I hope you enjoy Act 2.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.